topic is Angular. We're going to have a very simple introduction, and let's see if we get to build something interesting here. So let's go here in the experiments, Angular. So did I already do something with Angular? Apparently not. All right, so to get a hold of Angular, to download the framework, you go to AngularJS.org. And from here, you can download the latest, right, the stable version 1.3. Right, and I believe I already downloaded it. Let me see. I believe I have it already. My essentials JS. Let's see. Yes, I did. It's already there. I already downloaded it, but just to show you where you can download it. And to install it so that you can use it, it's as easy as in your HTML document, including the angular.min.js. Okay? That's easy as that. So let's create a very simple web application using Angular. All right, so simple AngularJS hello world. Okay. So what we're going to do here is to declare this as being an AngularJS application. We're going to use what is called a directive called ng app. Okay. What Angular does is that it augments the HTML language. Okay, it declares all sorts of brand new attributes that weren't there before. Okay, and they all have the prefix ng dash. Right, so you can distinguish it as being a native HTML attribute or an Angular attribute. Okay, and Angular calls these directives. Right, when you load the framework, it pretty much takes control over your entire page. It says, "Oh, I'm going to parse this entire thing. I'm going to reinterpret the document." Okay, it's going to declare all sorts of new things that augment the HTML language. Right. So let's declare that, and let's declare here right in our JavaScript. I'm going to declare here a companion JavaScript. Right. I'll call it the same name. So just for 000 HTML, there'll be a 000 JavaScript. Right, so that we know they're related to one another. And I'm just going to link it, right? I'm going to load it in. So script source JS 0. There it is. Okay, everybody okay? All right, I'm going to name my application. Right, I'm going to call this hello app. Okay, everybody okay with me? All right. So what's going to happen here is that in my JavaScript, right, I have, just like jQuery declares the magical jQuery function, right, that namespace, well, Angular too declares a particular object, right, the Angular object, right? So from within my, here I can declare, right, Angular.module, right, modules, and in here I can declare an application. Right, modules in Angular allows you to break up your application into many smaller pieces. Okay, like a class, right? Sort of like a class, right? So in your modules, you can declare a top-level module, and then you can declare several child modules that you can break up your application into. Okay? So right now we're declaring the main application, the one that declares our application, and to declare it, we use the same name that we used in the directive. So it's hello app, and then you can declare several dependencies on if this module depends on other modules. Right? This is going to be the top level module. It's going to be a very, very simple module. It's not going to depend on anything yet. Okay, so we're going to say nothing. So this would be an array of other modules that we depend on, which not depending on anything. Okay. I think it's just module. And now that we declared it, we're going to put it inside of a variable so that we can reuse this module which we've just declared. Is it okay? All right. All right, that's it. We've just instantiated our first Angular application. Let's have our application say hello. Okay, let's run this first. Console, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's complaining about map. Let me download that too. Min. It's this one. Download. I want to save it. Where is it? Let's see. Here. JS. There it is. I'll save it. All right, it's not complaining anymore. All right, so we declare that. So for Angular, anything that is not inside of a special, yes.
Would you prefer us to have our own files, or does it matter? Do you care if we use the URL or software?
Like this, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So preferably, everything lives in its own file. Okay. From time to time, I will take a shortcut and do it directly on the HTML document, only to keep it self-contained, right? So that I don't have that many dependencies. From time to time, I will do that, right? But it's typically considered bad practice, right? It's always a good practice to split it up into small modules that you can perhaps reuse, right? Okay, so very much like other server-side technologies, anything that is outside any context of the framework is considered to be static text, right? Like this .html, this HTML, all this is considered to be static text. Okay, like this H1 is considered static text. Everybody okay? All right, makes sense. But when you put something inside of a context, right? Then the framework can take control of that piece of real estate, right, and do things with it, right? The way that Angular takes control of your page, right? Your page is considered to be the view, right? It's what the user consumes, is what the user sees, right? So it's considered to be a view. And the architecture that Angular takes is that we're gonna feed the view with data, right? We're gonna go off and get data from somewhere, and then we're gonna feed that data to the view for the view to then render it for us. Yes, right? That design pattern, that's a kind of an architectural design pattern, right? Is referred to as the model view controller design pattern, right? Where the model represents your data or where you're retrieving the data from, or the overall data layer that might represent all the relationships between different objects, different classes, right? The controller is the one responsible for getting a hold of this data, right, and then feeding it to the view, right? So you have this overall architecture here, right, where you have the view, the control, and the model over here, where you have the data. The control fetches the data, right, and then decides which view. You might have many views. You might have different views. It might say, oh, you should render it, or you should render it, and passes the data to whoever needs that view. Okay. Never does the view know what the original data might be, right? The controller might massage the data. Okay. Might add data, additional data. Just so that the view can then render it correctly. Okay. And the model should not have to care how the data is going to be rendered ultimately. Right? It is the view who decides, oh, you know what, for the same data, 1, 2, 3, right, I'll render it maybe as a graph. Or view 2 might take exactly the same piece of data and might decide that it's going to use a pie chart. right? Or view 3 might decide that it'll use, bars. Yes? Same data, 3 different ways to render it, correct? Right, so the data should never care on how is this eventually going to be rendered. The data only cares about the data. Yes? Right? And then the view should not care on how this is represented, right? It might be an array, it might be objects, it might be something. The controller might do a transformation of what the original model is and transform it enough so that the view could consume it and render it. Okay, so Angular follows this design pattern. Okay. What's the view? The HTML, the divs, the H1s, the table rows, the table data, and whatnot. Yes? Everybody okay? Right. Let's look at this controller feeding data to the view. All right, let's do that. All right. So the way you tie the view with the control is that you declare the view, right? Say this is the view I want to control. Okay? The way that I tell the Angular that this particular piece of real estate, this particular piece of view, I want the following controller to control it. I can say ng controller, and I'm telling it, hey, this little piece of real estate is going to be controlled from this controller. So this is my hello controller. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go back in JavaScript because that controller does not exist. Let's declare that controller. You can say app.controller. I can declare that controller. I called it, what I call it? Hello controller. Okay. And it says I'm declaring this controller, which the view is referencing, right? Angular is going to look at this, right? Angular is going to look at this and going to say, oh, okay, you want this div to be controlled by the controller. Okay, let me look it up. All right, where is it? Nobody declared it. Oh, okay, there it is. All right, it's been declared, right, with using the app, right, that was instantiated from using the module. And the way it gets instantiated is that we provide a constructor. We provide a constructor. Constructors in JavaScript are just plain old functions. All right, we're going to create an instance here. And we're going to just say alert hello from hello controller. Okay. Let's refresh this. It says hello from hello controller. So yes, so that function is being instantiated by Angular because it sees the binding. It sees the binding. It says, the view is bound to the control. To this control. And what does that controller do? It just says hello. That's all it's doing, right? If I take that away, right? If this div, I remove this. If I remove that, right? There is no binding. Right, that div is not being controlled by anybody. The controller is being instantiated. Since nobody's referencing that controller is never being instantiated. Okay, it's being declared but never instantiated. Okay, let's go back. All right. So now inside of a page, I can have many controllers, right? I can have a controller for the header. I can have a controller for the sidebars. A controller for the footer, a controller for the main content, and they can all talk to one another, right? And I can break up my application into all sorts of little pieces. Okay, each one, retrieving data from different places. Okay, and each controller is responsible for their little piece of the page. Like for instance, this hello controller is only responsible for this little piece for this div. And anything inside of it. Okay? Everybody okay? Right? So meaning controllers have their own scope. Right? I can have controller, hello controller, right? And I have another one, hello controller 2, right? Which is this one will be responsible for this little div, and this one will be responsible for this other little div. Make sense? Yes.
Do you ever nest controllers?
Yes, you can nest controller. Yeah. Right. So what my point was that each one has its scope, right? And if you nest them, they would have nested scopes. Right? Each controller has its own scope of that who is responsible for, right? And and the way that the connection between these two worlds, the scope in the UI and the scope in the control, the way they talk to one another is through a magical variable called scope. Okay, and this is not very this is not very uncommon that in frameworks you have lots of magical variables, right? If you've ever written, in .NET or in JSP, right? You have request, response, application, page, right? All those are, right? Those are magical variables, right? That get declared by the framework, right? The framework declares them, right? By the time you get here, the framework is already taken over, right? So scope is one of those magical objects that gets instantiated much before, right, you get here, right? And if you ask for it, it will pass. The framework will pass it to you. Okay? And scope represents the connection between these two worlds, between the UI, right, and the controller. So whatever you do to the scope, you do to the UI. For instance, you can feed data to the UI. You can say hello world. Oops. Right, you can say, hey UI, here I'm sending you a variable called hello, right? And the value of that variable is hello world. The UI can catch that and says, okay, thank you. And it can render it and says, I'll put a placeholder called hello, and then render that data that the controller sent it. Yes? Okay, so the controller sent this data. So if we render, oops, hello world, undefined, blah, blah, blah. What is this? It's saying that I declared a controller that is not declared. I'm referencing a controller that does not exist. Yeah, over here, right? This hello2 does not exist. It was complaining. Refresh it. Notice it says hello world, right? Is that in the initial HTML? It's not, right? You have these funny looking curly brackets. Yes? These funny looking curly brackets. And what the curly brackets do is says, anything that is not in curly brackets is plain text. Yes? Anything that is not in curly brackets is plain text. Everything that is inside of curly brackets, it's a calculated or evaluated expression, right? That the framework will fill in. Okay, notice that if the framework does not put anything there, and I render it, notice that the curly brackets are not there. Okay, even though, right? Notice that if I put it outside, right? If I put it outside of the controller, right? Outside. Notice that the curly brackets. The hello app is is looking for this. Let me remove this for a second. There they are, right? The curly brackets are there because they're just plain text. Yes, but because because the framework is taking over, curly brackets have a special meaning. It means here is a variable, here's a placeholder, right, that the framework will fill in. Okay, right? So when the framework looks at outside, it says, "Oh, who has a value for this variable? Nobody? Okay, it's going to be blank." Right? I'm just going to blank it out. Right? So if I refresh, there is no value. It's just blank. The empty string. Nobody has a value for it. Okay, fine. I'll just erase it. It'll just be blank, right? This one, the controller can feed data into here, right? The controller can feed data. There it is, hello world. So it is the controller who's feeding data. Everybody okay? Everybody still with me? All right? Okay. I can feed not only plain text, I can feed whole objects. I can say a course. A course might have a title. AngularJS 101. right? It might have it might have a description, right? Awesome. Okay. And on the right, on the control, on the view side, I can display that. I can say course. Right. If I render that, notice that it renders the little JSON. Right. It says, okay, I have an object. I know how to render an object. I'll render it as is. Notice that it added the extra double quotes, right? Which I didn't. Right. I didn't have that. I didn't have the double quotes for the title, but it added it. Right. Because this is the proper way of creating JSON with everything quoted or everything double quoted, right? I can since it's an object, I can render each portion of the object, each property attribute of the object, right? So if I render, notice there it is. There's the title. You see that? Title is there. You see that? Right? I can put it in right. I can put it inside of other HTML elements, right? For instance, I can put course.title inside of H2. There it is, AngularJS 101, right? And maybe put the description in a paragraph, right? So I can say in a paragraph, I might want the course and the description. There it is, awesome, right? So what's happening here? I'm using HTML as a template, right? It's a template. I'm feeding data in here, right? I'm feeding data and it's being rendered using HTML as a template. Okay, everybody still with me? Did I lose anybody? Okay, all right. Okay. Not only can I send objects, I can send whole arrays of objects. I can say scope courses, right? And this could be one object, right? Title, right? So this would be Java 101, right? And description. And you put here this Java description. And then have several of these objects. So this is C#, JavaScript, MongoDB, Node.js. So this was what? This was C#, JavaScript. This is MongoDB and Node.js. Right? And I can send all this data. That's how I'm sending it, right? I send $ scope courses. I'm sending that over to the view. I'm saying, hey, view, you want to render this, please? Right? And the view can say, okay, fine, I'll render it. For now, I'll just render courses, just like that. Let's see what we get. Let's see what we get. Right, there it is, right? There's the array. See the array down below? Okay. Well, I can render it maybe if it's an array, perhaps the way I might want to render it is using a UL. Right? UL, and because it's several of these, right? So let's render it using maybe a line item. And inside of the line item, I might want to render maybe the title. Let's say span. This is the title, and maybe another span for the description. Okay. So maybe what I would want to do is iterate over a course of this array of courses, and then for each one use the line item to render each course. Yes, right. That's typically what we would do. That's what we did in jQuery. Didn't we do that? How would we do that? We would declare this to be a template, right? And then as we iterate, we would grab the template, we would clone it, and then we would append for each element in the array. Isn't that what we did in jQuery? Right? Well, that was very low level, right? It's extremely low level. Over here is so much easier. There is no JavaScript involved. Absolutely no JavaScript involved. What we do is says that this is the template we want to use, right? Li, this is the template. And I want to use this template over and over and over for every course in courses, right? Yeah, that's what we do. We says, I want to repeat this template, okay, for each course in courses. Right? This is the courses, right? With this is the array, right? This is the array of objects, correct? Yeah. Now in this scope, right, I can use this variable, which is each element it's an object inside of each course, right? Inside of the array here. And now I can use here that I can render maybe the title, course dot title, and course dot description. Right? If I refresh that, look at that, the LI. You see that? I mean, how many lines of code would we have to do this if this was jQuery? Yes.
We should repeat courses. If you had an object that was named course in your Java,
yep.
would it overwrite that?
Well, we do, right? We do have an object called course. Yeah, and they have different scope, right? This is a local variable, right? Just the way you would expect, right? This is a local variable that is tied to each one of the objects in the array, right? Which have nothing to do with the other course object, right? They're referential, different references. Yep. And it's actually bound to those objects. Whatever happens to those objects gets bound here. Right? We'll see. Yes.
So could you call it something other than course?
Yeah, you can call it whatever you want. Yes, you can call it whatever you want. Actually, let's do that before you guys get confused, right? So I'll just call it, what should I call it? I'll choose another language, curso. What's that? Spanish. Okay, that works. I'm going to take out the array. The array was there only for debugging purposes. There it is. Everybody okay? Yes? Right? No JavaScript. No JavaScript to iterate over this. Right? In jQuery, you would have to iterate over the arrays, right? Get the template, clone it, repopulate everything, right? Each one of the elements, grab it by the class or the ID, right? And then add it back to the DOM, right? Maybe it might look better as a table instead of UL, right? So I'm going to change this to a table. I'm going to change this to a row. I'm going to change this to a TD, and change this to TD. And I'll refresh it and notice that it's so easy to change it. The template is to change. It's very, very easy. Okay. I might load also some Bootstrap here so that to make this look a little prettier. So let's link href, go up again, CSS, and Bootstrap. So Bootstrap, there it is. Rel style sheet. Looks a little more presentable. And our table, I'm just gonna use class table and table striped. All right, so I'll refresh that. So it looks a little better, right? It looks a little prettier. Everybody still with me? Okay, all right. Perhaps I might also put a container around this, class container. Just to, again, make it a little more presentable. There it is. Okay, some padding there. All right, everybody okay? All right. Another thing that actually, let me copy this. It's getting too complicated. Let me copy this and let's rename this 001. Okay, and I'll also copy the JS. This be 001. And in my HTML, I need to change that, right? In my HTML, I'm rendering 1, right? Okay, and here, let me bring up 001. Okay, it's the same, right? 001, 000 are the same. Everybody okay? All right, in 001, I'm going to remove this outside. And here I'm going to remove the hello and the course and the title. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's do a couple things. Let's see here. How about being able to remove things? Right, we would like to be able to add and remove new things from our list. Yes, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's see. We would like to maybe add a button at the end that would allow us to remove a course. So let's add a button at the end. Button, right? And this is, I'm going to paint it with a button. Button danger. Makes it red. And I'm going to put here a span that paints this with an X. So I'm going to copy that from Bootstrap. Bootstrap components, the X is this one. It's a glyphicon, which I hope I downloaded it. I think I did. And I can say class, and that adds a danger button at the end. Let's see. Refresh. Okay, we have the X at the end, right? On the right-hand side. Another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pull right so that it flushes all the way to the right. There it is. So it's all the way to the right, right? So what we want to be able to do is, as we click, right, we want to remove this this course from the original list. Yes? Now, this list obviously is hard-coded, right? The list. Oh, my mouse doesn't move. Ah, what the heck? Okay. Remember that the array is hard-coded. Yes? The array is hard-coded. In real life, this array would not be hard-coded, right? Where would this data come from? It would come from from server, from some database, from somewhere, right? For now, let's use this very simple example where it's hard-coded. Okay. All right. So let's go back here. So basically, what I want to do is, when I click on this button, I want to notify my controller. I want an event handler to remove this object from the array. Everybody okay? Well, let's do that. So to create event handlers in Angular, we use ng-click, right? And we'll notify the controller. We say remove course, right? And this course, this function, this event handler, will be declared in the JavaScript. The way you declare event handlers in JavaScript in Angular is that you again do scope, saying, hey, the UI wants to call this function when they click on that button, right? So this is the function that the UI wants to call. There it is, remove course. This is what ties me back to the UI. Yes? It says, hey, the UI, right, wants to call this function, right? So for now, let's do an alert. We'll say alert, and let's say remove course. Okay, let's see if that works. Let's refresh. So if I click here, we get the alert. Okay. Now what we need to do is be able to identify one course versus another, right? We're going to say, oh, it's this course you're trying to remove, right? So how do we identify the course? Well, here's one magical way of doing it. You can pass, see this curso here? That represents, right? That represents the course that was used, right? The object instance that was used to render that line of table row. Yes? Right? So Angular remembers what object was used, right, to render each one of the template elements, right? So what's the template? The template is this whole thing, right? That's the whole template, meaning I grabbed that, right? It must have copied it, right? And then appended, right, to the table as it was iterating, right? I was iterating over this, but it remembers each object instance that was used. So we can pass that object instance to remove course. And pass it as an argument, says, this is the course that we want to remove, right? Very, very object-oriented, right? This says, I have a reference of the object that was used to render this row, this table row, right? And each row remembers which object was used, right? So I can pass it to you, Right. So now I can say I can instead of alert, we're going to say we're going to receive here the course. We're going to receive there, right? And we're going to console log the course. We're going to console to right. We're going to display. So we're going to render this. We're going to view the inspect this and oops, what's it complaining about? Oh, Glyphicon. I guess I didn't download the entire fonts. I didn't, really? See, it says fonts. I thought I did. Fonts. What is it complaining? It's Glyphicon's half-lengths regular. Glyphicon's half-lengths regular. .wolf 2. There it is. It is there. Huh. The server responded, blah, blah, blah. Oh, maybe because it has to run. Let me see. Wait a minute. View. No, it's still there. Why it says that I can't find it? It's there. Fonts. Fonts. Glyphicons. Dash half-lengths dash regular wolf 2. Interesting. Why does it think it's not there? Yeah, it's there. Huh. All right, I'm just going to ignore it for now. I'm not going to debug it now. Anyway, so as I click here, notice, see that? I clicked on it. Look at what it came back. This is the object. This was the original object that was used to render that. You see that? With some added attributes that Angular adds to the object to keep track of it, right? So if I click on this one, it'll be C#. There it is. That's the object that was used, right? If I click on this, right? See that? Those are the objects that were used, right? Pretty cool, huh? Right? That it remembers what object was used to render each one of these, okay? Okay, so now that the JavaScript has the course, what do we need to do? If it's this one, we want to remove that one. If it's this one, we want to remove that one. Yes? Let's do that. Let's do that. Let's find out what's the index of that object. We can say var the index is using the original array. Use the original array. I want to know what's the index of the object that was clicked. Remember, what Angular has is a reference to the original object that was used to render it. Yes? So it has references to all of these objects. Okay? Right? So if I say index of whatever, right? If this is the object that was used to render, this will come back with 0, 1, 2. That's the index. Yes? Right? So let's print out the index. Print out the index. Let's refresh that. So if I click here, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 0, 4, 1, 3, 2. See that? I know the index now of the objects that was used to render that, right? And now we can just remove it from the array, right? We can just splice it out. We can say, okay, now that I know the index, I can say course. I want to splice. Splice in JavaScript allows you to remove an item from an array. Okay, so I can say splice the element that is at index, and I just want to splice 1. Right? You can splice any number of elements, right? I only want to splice 1. What do you think would happen after we splice it out? We would need to re-update the UI, right? That's what we had to do in jQuery, remember? Right, in jQuery, we were updating the data, right, in the back end, well, in the client, right, in the JavaScript, and then we would go back and re-render the entire thing. Didn't we do that? Isn't that what we did? Okay. All right, let's see here. Let's render that, right? I remove, the UI is rendering all by itself. What's up with that? I never told it to re-render, right? Why is that? Angular maintains a double binding, right? The UI says, I'm using that data model. Whatever happens to that data model, I am notified, right? I am observing any changes in the data model. If the data changes, I change, right? And not only that, if the UI changes somehow, the data model changes, right? There's a two-way binding, we say, right, between the view and the control, right? If there's an input field here, right? If the input field is tied to some data and I type it, the data model changes in the back end. Well, the back end. This is all client side, obviously, right? Right? Is that cool? Right? That you have these binding between these two worlds. I didn't have to explicitly say, hey, you need to re-render yourself. There's no need to do that. Angular maintains all these linkages. Right? Make sense? All right, everybody still with me? All right, okay. So notice that the JavaScript has become very, very simple. Right, with just with 2 lines of code, we're able to remove things from the UI, re-render all by itself. Wow. Okay. All right. So how about let's start a brand new one here. Let's go back here and let's start a new example, experiment, copy, AngularJS, copy, paste, and I'll call this 002. Right, and the JavaScript, I'll say that this is 002. And here's 02. There it is. There it is. And it links to 2. And I'm going to call 2. All right. So obviously, none of these changes are being made permanent, right? I mean, we're not storing this in any database, right? We're not storing this in any file. Everything gets thrown away when you refresh the page, obviously, right? Next week, if I think we can get to Node.js, then we'll start talking about persisting this somewhere, right? Perhaps sending over to the server and the server storing it somewhere, right? We're not there yet, right? We're still way at the client on the client side. All right, so this is still working. I can still remove. Let's update this so that I can add things to the data model, right? So let's add here. Let's see. Let's go to the table. Let's put this in the table body. This table row, all these table rows, we'll put in a table body. Okay, and let's add a header to the table. Right, we'll say T head, and we'll say this is T row and TH. This is the title, right, and the description. Right? Description. Right, so we have that table and description. Notice that there's this funny looking thin line over here. And that's because all my rows have 3 columns, but the header only has 2. Yes? So I'm just going to add an empty table head here, like that. Although if I'm gonna leave it empty like that, it's always a good practice to put a non-breaking space. Non-breaking space. There we go. There it is. So now it looks fine. All right. Let's add now another table row, and I'm going to put a little form here. I'm going to use a form that I'm going to use to be able to add data, okay, add a course, right? So this is, I'm going to put an input field here, I'll put an input field, right? Let's add 2 input fields and a button. So there's 2 input fields, right? There they are. There's the 2 input fields, 1 input field for the title, 1 input field for the description. Yes, right? And a button at the end. Let's add a button here. And here, like with a plus or something, right? There it is. So there's a plus. This looks awful, right? So let's make it look a little prettier using Bootstrap. So I'm going to add here a class, form control. Okay. So that looks a little prettier. Notice that it's rounded edges and it takes up the entire width. And the button, we're going to do the same thing. For the button, we're going to say that the class is going to be button, and button, I'll use success for green. There it is. It's green. I'm also going to push it to the right-hand side so that it's flush to the right-hand side. So I'm going to pull right. It's nice and flush to the right-hand side. And also, instead of using this ugly plus sign, I'm going to use a glyphicon from Bootstrap. I'll use a plus sign. There's the plus sign, right? Plus, there it is. And to add it, we're going to use a span class, the glyphicon. There it is. So the plus looks nicer. Okay, everybody okay? All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to create just an event handler, just like we did previously, right? For removing these, we're going to use create an event handler to notify the controller that we want to add the elements in these input fields. Yes, to create a new course and add it to the list of courses. Yes, right? Okay, so we're going to say ng click add course. Okay. So this add course doesn't exist in our JavaScript, so let's add it here. We're going to say here, there it is. So we'll say scope add course. It's a function, right? Right, and let's see if this works. Alert if this works. Right, so if we refresh, right, and we click on here, alert add course. So it's linked. Yes? Everybody okay? We have an event handler. All right, so what do we want to do? Basically, what we want to do is be able to grab these, whatever I type here. If I click on plus, I want it to be added to the array. Correct? Right, that's basically what we're going to do. And how would we do this in jQuery? We would typically add a class here, right, and say this is the title, right, and this is the description, right? That's how we would do it in JavaScript, yes? But that's so low level, right? That's so non-object oriented, right? Instead, we're going to create an object out of this and say, we're going to tell the controller that says these two fields are part, right, of an object, right? Like we'll call it maybe like new course object, right? So these are declaring a model and it says that these two fields are two parts of the same object. We'll call it new course dot title, and this is part of an object. I'm declaring a brand new object with description. Description. Okay, and I can pass this as an argument. Right? Well, I don't really have to, but if I go to here, right, I can receive that new course as an argument, and I can say console log the new course. Let's play around with that. Right, if I type a new course title, and this is new description, and I click on add, notice that what do I get? I get an object. You see that? This is much more object oriented, right? Instead of being so low level, than having to grab a class or an ID or being DOM dependent, right? Over here, I'm not DOM dependent, right? I declare an object which gets populated, and I can get a hold of that object in the Angular controller. You see that? Right? I get an actual object. Okay. Everybody still with me? Did I lose anybody? Everybody still with me? Yeah. So I got an object. Very good. What do I want to do with that object? I want to just add it to the array, right? Isn't that what I want to do? Okay. Well, we can't just add it to the array. What we need to do is create first an object, a clone of that object. Title is new course dot title, right? And that the description is new course description. Now that we have a copy of that object, we could then add it, append it. We can say scope. Where's our courses? Is inside of the courses, isn't it? Courses. And how do we add to the array? we push, right? And that adds the new object to the end of the array. Yeah. So we say push, we can say object. Right. And then what do you think? We need to tell the UI to update? We're not going to have to, right? Right. Remember, the UI has two-way bindings. Whatever happens to the model, the UI says, oh, the model changed. I need to change. Right. Whatever happens to the model, the UI is bound to it. It's a two-way binding. I don't even have to tell the UI to refresh. Let's see if that works. Right. So Node.js. Let's create here AngularJS 101, which is not in the list, right? It's not in the list. And copy here description. Click on add, and notice that. Look at that. It's at the end. See that? No need to even tell the UI to refresh, right? It understands that that repeater is bound to that array. Whatever happens to that array, if the array changes, the UI says, oh, I need to update myself, right? Because whatever happens to that array happens to the UI. Whatever happens to the UI happens to the array, right? They're doubly bound, right? Two ways. Yes?
Where's that bind like the current?
The framework. The framework does that. It is what happens with the framework, right? When you say right here, when you say that this repeater is bound to this array, okay, it says okay, right? So whatever happens to that array, I'm going to be listening, right? If that array is ever, made empty, well, I'm going to have to make this template empty. If ever something gets removed from this array, I'm going to have to refresh this, right, and re-update everything, right? So if you were doing this in jQuery, you would have to, or if you're doing this in in some other framework, you would have to create all these listeners, right? You would have to listen. Oh, the object model change. I need to fire that. Everybody has to register for changes in the model, right? And whoever's listening to all these changes, right? They need to re-update themselves. Over here, you get that for free. You don't have to create all these bindings. Everybody okay? All right. Okay. All right. So I can edit. I can add. Ideally, I would want to go where? Save this to the. Typically, what I want to be able to do is save this to a database, right? But here we don't need to. We're not going to do that because we don't have a server, really, right? We don't really have a server, or do we? We do have a server, don't we? What server do we have? Remember the server we were playing around with at the end of last week, right? We were using jQuery to hit an IMDb server. Didn't we do that, right? So we do have data somewhere out there which we could go and fetch, right? So why don't we do that? I mean, we can't save to the server, but at least we could get a hold of it, right? So let's do that. Before we do that, let's go a little bit further with this. Let's see. How about I have a list of these courses, and I want to register, or maybe I want to favorite one. It says, ooh, I want to. So these two are my favorite. I want to register for those two courses. So let's do that. All right, let's do that. For instance, what I want to do here, as I iterate over the courses, I want another button. Let's add another button. And this is going to be like a star, right? Where as I click on the star, this is one of my favorite courses, right? So I'm going to do class button and button maybe. Let's see, info. What color is info? I forget. Maybe warning. Warning, I think is orange. That's a button. And I'm gonna I want a star in here. So let's see if Bootstrap has a star. Okay, let's use this. There's a star. Let's use that. Let's put a span class, and put this. There we go. So let's re-render that. Oh, actually, you know what? We should do this in a separate experiment, right? Let's start up a brand new experiment. But let me just see how it renders. Let's see. Is it this one? Is it 2? Yeah, it's 2. Let's render. Yeah, that's a star, right? There's my star. But let me start off a new experiment here so that you can follow along later on with different versions, right? Right there, each one incrementally more. Oh, what did it just do? I don't think I want to do that. Wait, copy, paste, and that's 2, right? There we go. And I'm going to edit 3. And 3 depends on 3. There we go. Right? And I'm going to update here 3. Okay, there we go. So we're still in the same place. Yes? Everybody okay? Are you still with me? All right. And that star, I'm also going to pull right, so that I'm going to pull it right so that it renders to the right. There we go. All right. So if I click on that, what I want to be able to do is maybe, favorite and put it in some other array, right? In an array of my favorites. Yes? Right? An array of my favorites. Okay, let's do that. Let's see. I want to create an event handler and say ng-click. I'm going to say favorite this course. Right. So I want to notify my controller that I have made this one of my favorites. Right. So I'm going to make an event handler for that. Right. I'm going to say scope.favorite, the function that's going to receive the event handler and the course that I am making my favorite. Yes? And where do I put it? Well, I'm going to put it in a data model here. And say I'm going to make an array of favorites. So right now it's empty. Right now it's empty. I don't have any favorites. Yes? But if I make something favorite, I'm going to say push, right, that course into the array of favorites. Yes, correct. And I'm just going to render. I'm just going to do console log my course, my favorites, to see. Right, what's it look like so far? Right, so let's refresh that and let's view the inspect element down below. Let's put it down below. Console. Okay, so I can say that this is my favorite. So notice that my array now only has one object. You see that? Right? If I click here, maybe it says, oh, now I have 2 objects in my array. Right? Of which, let's see, one of them is Java. It's one of my favorite, yeah. And my second one is JavaScript. So yeah, so those 2 courses are my favorite, right? Right, so I added Java more than once, I believe, Java description and Java. So it's added twice, right? Perhaps we could check to make sure that it's not the same object, but I'm not going to do that, right? If it's the same object, then maybe we don't push, right? Right. We see that if it's already there, we do not push. Actually, we can do that, right? We could check to see if it's already there. We can say var index. We can say look at the current. Actually, we can do it in an if statement, right? We can say if that array index of the cores, right, is not -1. -1 is when it's not found. Yes? -1 is when it's not found. I guess you could say when it's greater than 0. Oh, greater or equal to 0, right? If it's greater than or equal to 0, it means that it was found. Yes? Right? So if it's found, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to return. Right? If it's found, I'm not going to add it again, right? If it's not already in the array, I am going to add it, right? So let's do that. So if I do Java and then do Java again, nothing happens. But if I add Java C# and I click C#, nothing happens. If I click Java, so it ignores any time I try to add the same object that is already there. Make sense? Okay. So I want to render my favorites, right? So let's render it. Where's my favorites? It's in this array. Well, did we already render an array? Did we do that already? Well, let's do that, right? We can render that. Let's see. We have here. That's the title, the course title. Let's create here an H2 favorites. Favorite. I can't spell. Favorites. Okay. I want to render, right? I can render here favorites, right? I can say the object is called what? That's the object, favorites. So let's paste that in here. There it is. As I click here, it's not working. Why isn't this working? Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. It was way up there. Let's refresh again. So notice that at first it's empty, but as I add, notice that it's growing. You see that? It's an array. It won't change if I try to add the same object. So it's an array. It's just an array with titles and descriptions. We know how to iterate over that, don't we? Right? Instead of doing this, what could we do? We can say table, right? We can say, with class, table, striped, right? With table t-body, and table row, and table data, and display here the course.title. And then where we get that course, we're getting it from this template. We're going to say that I want to repeat this table row over and over for each course in favorites. And I want to display the course title, and I want to display the course description. Right. So if I add, notice that the table is changing up there. See that? There it is. So I've added each one to the array. You see that? Right? Right. So we could unfavorite. Right. So we could put here like a star that maybe we could use this one over here, the empty star, meaning that if I click on it, I am unfavoring it. Right? And again, that would be another event handler, correct? Would be another event handler that would remove that object from the favorites array, correct? You see that? Everybody still with me? Did I lose anybody? Okay. All right. So let's do the same thing, but now let's play around with that web service that we were playing around with on last week. Let's look at the event handler, the UI. Where was it? I think it was there. It is. My Films, right? My Films API. My Films API. If you remember, did we do this in jQuery? We did this through jQuery, right? So let's see what it would look like using Angular. So let's go down below. We're gonna have the same issue that we had in jQuery, that it's a JSON-P, right? We're gonna have to use JSON-P instead of a regular get. So let's just knowing that this is a database, right? And let's see what the URL looks like. Bottom movies, top movies, example. There it is. So let's click here, avatar, right? And I want JSON-P, and I want to click, right? And that's the URL. So I'm going to copy that URL. Okay, I'm going to copy the URL, copy, right? And let's create another experiment to do this, right? So this will be 0. I'll call it 010, right? It is a major change, a major shift. This is 010, right? And 010, I'm actually going to rename this. So this is using Angular to fetch data from third-party API, right? And in here, right, I'm gonna give it here an H1 with that title, okay? And the controller, actually, I'm gonna do this whole thing all over again. Let's start from scratch. Let's start from scratch. Let's see. We don't even have a controller. I'm gonna even change the application. Let's call it my films API app. Okay, and JavaScript. The JavaScript here. Let's start from scratch. Okay, the application's name has changed, and I'll call this div. I'm going to say that this is going to be my controller. My controller is going to control this piece of real estate. And this is going to be called my film API controller. Okay? All right. And, sorry? Did I misspell it?
No, that's great.
Oh, yes. Thank you. This is 010, right? And we're gonna go here, and that's my new controller. There we go. Okay. What we want to do is fetch from that HTML, right? From that URL, correct? We did this in jQuery using Ajax. Yes. Well, in Angular is very similar. Instead of using the Ajax object inside of in jQuery or function in jQuery, there is another magical object or servers in this case that allows us to make HTTP network connections. Right? That object is or service is called the HTTP service. Right? The HTTP service allows us to make network connections to outside anywhere we want. Okay. And the way it works is that you give it what do you want to do? Do you want to generate a GET request? Do you want to generate a POST request? Do you want to generate a DELETE request? Put, or are you doing JSON-P? Right. In this case, we are using a JSON-P. Right. We're going to do a JSON-P request, and we give it the URL. Give it the URL. I'm going to copy the URL. Copy the URL. It says, I want you to go and fetch data from there. Okay? There is some syntax. AngularJS, GP, HTTP, JSON-P, JSON-P. Some syntax that I do not recall. JSON-P, where is it? Let's see. Where is it? JSON-P. Protractor, HTML, blah, blah, blah. There it is. At the end of the URL, you need to add this piece here. And well, not at the end, anywhere in the URL, you need to say, right? If you remember, when you use JSON-P, the way it works, right, is that to thwart the security of the browser, right, we fool the browser into thinking that instead of retrieving data from another domain, what we're retrieving is just a plain text file, right? Remember that? That's the way we're fooling it, right? We're saying, oh, no, this is just a JavaScript file, text file that we're downloading. And the browser says, oh, okay, right? And when it downloads, really once it downloads to our domain, right, what it really is a function call. Remember that? right? It's a function call, and then it calls, you know, a function inside of our JavaScript. And if you have a function named the same name of the function that they're calling, then the data gets transferred. Okay. Well, in what part of that standard is that you can pass as an argument, as a parameter in the URL, you can pass the name that you want for that function, right? Because that function lives, you're writing that function, right? You're giving it the name. When it downloads, you know, it should know what function to call, right? So the way Angular works is that it creates this placeholder, and Angular is gonna replace this placeholder with a bogus function name. jQuery does the same thing, right? jQuery generates a function name on the fly, right? And it's expecting the downloaded JavaScript to call that function. So here's how it works, right? Anyway, if everything is good, if everything's successful, it will notify us at the function that we give it, if everything's good, and it will pass us the response. You know, what did the server respond? And we can do console log response. Okay, let's see if this works, if it blows up on our face. Okay, let's load this 10. Okay, let's look at the response down below in the console. Array 1, right? That looks promising. Oh, look at that. Allen Racer, blah, blah, blah. What is this? Lima, Ohio, USA. What did I ask for? IMDb. Okay, it is. Okay, we're getting data, right? We're getting data from the server. I don't know if the data makes sense. The Clown Prince of Hardcore. What the? That doesn't sound right. What did I ask for? Avatar. Filmography. That doesn't look right. I'm going to use another name. Give me another name. What? Let's see. Give me something that is non compromising. Batman. There we go. Batman. Let's see. Let's refresh that. Okay, it's taking a while. It's taking a while. There we go. And we got 10 objects because I upped the limit. I said I want 10 objects. You see that? And there's our array, right, of objects, right? There's an array of objects. And what objects, what do the attributes look like in here? Let's see. We have Michael Patrick Boatman, Colorado Springs. Michael Boatman? Did I misspell it? Batman. What is up with IMDb today? Scatman? I'm afraid of clicking on those images. Zalt Batman Glitch is the director. Oh my goodness. Star Wars? Are you going to the right URL here? Walker, the all-star died. Junior Walker. Looks like a biography of Taylor. What is up with this? Star Wars. All right, let's see. All right, let's try to render that and see what we're getting back. We're gonna render it as a table row, And let's send the data. Let's send the data to the UI, right? And say scope.movies equal response, right? So we'll send it, and so we have, it is an array, and I'm going to iterate over that array in the UI. I'm going to use a table to render it. I'll use the same class here to render table striped and table body, table row. And I'm going to use, let's see, what does the objects look like? We have elements that we don't have anything for that. Oh, you know what? I might need a space. I might need a space here in the IMDb. So this would be 20. Oh, it doesn't like that. Did I miss Star Wars? Isn't it 20 for the for space? Let me look at the URL. Maybe I mistyped the URL. Star Wars JSONP. Example name, IMDb name. Example. Oh, title. Oh. Thank you, Avatar. Try it again. Okay, but this is the title for Hawaii genres, IMDb, fantasy, Avatar, soldier, fall in love with a beautiful alien, Naitri. That looks right? PG-13. Okay. Let's try it again. Okay, that looks much more appropriate. Copy link address. All right. Let's go to the end. I'm going to paste it here. There we go. Right, so in the data, I'm just going to spit it out here. It's movies. And let's re-render that. Okay, that looks more promising. Okay, that's what we're getting, right? So let's iterate over this data. And what do we have here? Let's see. We have genres. We have IMDb ID. We have the plot. So let's render the plot and the title. Okay. So let's put this down below for debugging purposes. So I'm gonna render here TD. I'm gonna render as I iterate ng repeat as I iterate over all the movies for every movie in movies, right? I want to render here movie, the title, right? And I want to render the plot, right? Let's see how that looks. There it is. I have a table row, right? Look at that. I have a table row with names of the movies on the left-hand side and the plot on the right-hand side. That looks very promising. I can create some favorites, right? Maybe I want to say that the last one, right? I can put a button at the end and say that this is a button, warning, and I want to put a star in here. Okay, let's grab a star from here. Right, and say that this movie is my favorite. Okay, if I click on that, I want to send and say that that particular movie is my favorite. So I can say, you know, ng click, right, is equal to notify, you know, add to favorites. Favorites. the movie, that particular movie, right? And I want to display here all my favorites, right? My favorites, which are right now are empty, right? So I can go back here and create an array of favorites and make it empty at first, right? We're doing pretty much the same thing we did earlier, right? In the previous example. We're going to have an event handler that's going to listen for me clicking that button. I'm going to say scope dot, what do I call it? The button? Add to favorites, right? And add to favorites is going to be a function that receives a movie that I want to put in my favorites. I'm going to say, okay, add it to my array. You know, I want to push it in there, movie. Let's look at that. Notice that at first the array is empty. And as I click and says, oh, I want that one, maybe that one too. That one. Notice that I'm adding to that array. Obviously, I can display it much prettier, right? So this is my, I want to maybe display here. Instead of displaying this way, I can say H2 favorites, right? And again, use a table striped, right? Table body, table row, and iterate over this. You can say, we can say ng repeat of my movie in favorites, right? And I want to display maybe just a title. How's that? Just movie dot title, right? And then I can favorite that. Notice that I'm adding those, right? They're being added to the favorites, plus a button at the end that allows me to remove it from my favorites, right? So I can say tr, and I add a button class, maybe button danger, to be able to remove it. And maybe I can use an empty star to say that I don't want it anymore. Let's fetch an empty star. Okay, what is it complaining about? Button. Oh, it needs to be in a TD. TD. Here we go. Right, and let's refresh this. So there's nothing there at first, but as I add it, oh, how did I add it? As a separate table row? Oh no, I wanted it here. I wanted to remove it from here and add it here, right? There we go. So as I add, notice that it's being added to my favorites at the top, right? And then I should be able to click and remove it from there. How about instead of searching something right away, right? Instead of searching right away, it's when we click on something, right? On a button where we search on something that it's an input field. Let's do that. This should be pulled to the right. So pull right. So let's add a search bar or something. Let's see. For that, we can go to CS here. We can go to button groups. Button groups allows us to group together input fields and buttons, for instance, right? So let's go down here looking for a button and an input field. Let's see. I think we're close. There we go. Here we go. We have like a go, right? You have an input field and a go. For that, we'll go with this one right here, input group. Just this one right there. Let's copy that. And here, right before the table, we're going to add that input group. And this one, I'm going to use the input field to grab the search, the title, right? The title search. So I'm going to tie this to the controller. I'm going to say that this is the search, the title search, right? And here's my button, right? My button is going to say, I'm going to tie it to the controller saying that if I click on this, I want to call the search title event handler, right? So let's do that. Let's go to 10. I want to say scope that dot title search is function, right? And this is going to take a look at the input field. The input field, I called it, what do I call it? Title search, right? So there it is. This is my title search. There it is. That's the variable I want to search on, right? Correct? So that's when I want to search, right? This is when I want to search. So this, instead of having this JSON-P just search blindly on avatar, right, all the time when I refresh the page, instead of doing that, I'm going to cut it out of here, right? And I'm only going to search when I click on the search button. Yes? Right? And what title am I going to search? I'm going to use this as a title search, right? Instead of being hard-coded to be avatar, I'm going to use scope title search. That makes sense? So my search at first is empty, right? My search results is empty at first, right? Notice that favorite search is empty. Everything is empty, right? So if I search on avatar and I say go, right, it searches and it comes back with results, right? Or if I click on 007 and I say go, right, it re-updates the whole thing, right, with all the elements. So for instance, these are the 10 elements from James Bond movies, right? And this is my favorite, and that was my favorite, and whatever. This is my favorite, right? So I have these 3 are my favorite, but I can search for other things, right? Mission Impossible. Search for that, and there we go. So I could say maybe I like that one, and I like that one, and I like that one. So notice that I have these favorites, right? That is right now I'm not remembering anything, right? But typically this would go out to the server. The server would do inserts in the record, right? And it would be able to remember so that tomorrow when I come back, right, and I log into this, it would have everything saved. Right now we don't have it. We don't have the ability to do that. We could save locally to local storage. But obviously it makes sense to first just save it to a database. Does that make sense? Right. Also notice that we're doing everything on the single page, right? Never are we reloading the page ever, right? More typically, we want to separate these into 2 pages, right? One where you do the search, right? And maybe another place where like your profiles page that shows all your favorite movies, correct? Right. These would have to live in separate pages. For that, we would need to be able to navigate between pages, right? But we know that we're creating single page applications, and single page applications, we never navigate to any other page. Instead, we update the page to look like we're navigating, right? To give you the same functionality without the same implementation, okay? And we'll do that when we come back on Thursday, okay? Any questions about this? All right. All right. If play around with this. I'll have an assignment on this next week, so you can play around with it. All right. Thank you.